Well, and then another sort of layer of fun, I would say, is how you can think about the near term. And Adam mentioned, there's two components to the vision. There's the long range plan, and there's the short range. And that's where in each of these schemes, there's sort of an existing condition and a proposed condition. And there's of course an in-between, where you may not get to the full final capital construction, but you could actually do things seasonally or on a short-term basis, like an installation. And so we actually wanted to sort of maybe call attention, especially to the village zone, which is where there's this real chance to maybe actually foreshadow the longer-term changes in terms of on the east side making that alfresco open-air dining zone in the parking lane. So just to remind you, that was this where the existing condition, where we would plan to recalibrate the lanes to 3 meters, 3.6 meters here, and then to actually reclaim a 2.3 meter line across that section. And that's an area where we talked about some of the initiatives already that happened in Toronto, where you occupy the street for several weeks, a month in the summer. Raj can speak to some of the successful things she's done. There's amazing stuff that happens on John Street, all over the city.
Church Street, Young Street.
But that's sort of where we wanted to begin to sort of engage you with ideas of like, what could be that first action? And it's also an amazing way, like we often refer to them as pilot projects, because you get a chance to see how it feels and how it performs. You can talk to vendors along the street who have been in front of this and say, how did that work for you? Did you miss the parking? Were people still finding you? Were they okay just parking on the other side of the street and coming over? Did it actually change habits of people? Did you get more business that summer? What would you do differently? And it's a chance to sort of refine some of the ideas, and then it makes it a better end solution. And incidentally, at a much bigger scale, we bumped into a gentleman who was reading about the transformations of New York City. They really showed the world in a way how by testing, by using pilot projects, you can really you can make major changes that in some ways would be too shocking at first, or too brutal to begin with. So the piloting projects, or the idea of these sort of shorter-term interim installations, is a wonderful tool, and it's a chance, to really have some fun.
Yeah, and just add as well, like what we're encouraging you to consider here is that, like, sometimes when you get involved with this kind of notion of a rebrand of a street, sometimes there's a cliche that people get in their heads that, maybe you'll make a gateway, a banner, I don't know, maybe it's strung across the street, it's lit up, it flashes, and it says welcome to, fill in the blank. But this is what we think, before you do that, even if you do that, maybe you don't do that, you make a place. And before you tell people where they've arrived, you give them somewhere to arrive to. Here we think the opportunity is actually right in the heart of your street, not necessarily right out of the edges straight away, but you give yourselves a new heart in what we've identified as this village zone. So that's why we're saying maybe that's where you test these interim ideas, see if you can kind of create a buzz at the heart, which brings people, of course, in and encourages people to use all the other parts of the streets as well. You work together, and that's where you deliver your first move. That's where you put your investment, in making place rather than signaling the same place and trying to give the face up. We've just rolled, I think we're pretty much there. So we just wanted to very, very, very quickly, before we got into any detailed design, just kind of reflect like what you have and what you could have. We talked about tree planting, so honestly the way the trees are planted and the space you have on the street, the only good ones you're getting are right in the park and on a few of the pots. So here on the park, there's some amazing trees. You just don't have a very friendly edge to the park, and that could be better. And actually in the park here, and this is a park next to the commercial building here on the corner of Davisville, some great pines. And then there's just this kind of drab, but amazing trees back in the neighborhoods. You guys have like these dinosaurs of trees around your houses, so it's kind of ironic that you don't have that on the street itself. What we'd like to see is that by making space and getting at least 30 cubic meters of soil, but ideally even more, like 50 cubic meters of soil, grow great trees. Maybe you don't grow them everywhere, like this kind of notion that outside every store there's going to be a tree, because you couldn't fit all that soil under 5 Mount Pleasants to grow these great trees. So instead of growing 5 small ones, grow one really big one that you'll notice from very far away.
And I think, you know, with that, you can start to read the corners and how that allows you to get bigger volumes of soil and really punctuate those corners. And then when you start to think about, you know, what could those trees be and how could actually you start to get a sense of the diversity growing out of the arboretum and sort of this, you know, this plantation that encourages all these different species coming together, and then starting to anchor the corners maybe by groupings of consistent species, so you get sort of a structure within which you get a nice mix of planting. The parking, again, we can talk about the existing versus the proposed. And I think the biggest thing to note is how, you know, let's say the creation of a thriving village is about reclaiming that parking space, so moving that to the west side and freeing up space on the east side, and so those are the numbers.
Yeah, and just maybe just on that. Yeah, to add to that. In the existing, you have the parking all the way along, which is great from one point of view, but that's why you don't have any space on your sidewalks. So what we're looking at then is, as Mark said, the village zone, maybe we shift it to one side, we'll test that. In the mid-rise zone, you get the corners back, but then you can park in between. And then what we're showing here as we go from Sudan to Eglinton is the notion that if people redevelop, they're going to redevelop parking underneath what they build. So you don't really need it on the street then. So use the street to get back more space and have the developers invest in a better public realm. Last few slides.
Story.
Yeah, you know, it's just kind of maybe we need a better graphic, but we're just trying to illustrate that existing you have a problem because the sidewalks are narrow to a point where they're not just that uninviting, they're a little bit dangerous. And in the proposed, we just took the background up so you can see, we're really just trying to get them into that kind of green zone of at least 4 meters, and maybe 5, 6, even 6 to 7. So you could, you know, just move, you know, 2 people side by side along, and you can actually gather on them, which is kind of the point of the project, I think. Next.
Yeah, so, you know, well, the first thing is to hear from you this evening, to incorporate any thoughts, advice. We're continuing to work with the BIA team and with Raj at the city to refine sort of how this can then get detailed further. I think particularly we're going to focus now in taking a look at some of the sort of street elements themselves, and the furnishings and the pavings and the systems, and getting into more detailed work on that. But I think then again, almost strategically starting to outline the projects and how they could unfold. We talked about the long-term goal and that blueprint, and then actually setting out a series of you know, action projects. And we suggested beginning with the village. We'll actually breaking that out and starting to make proposals for those. When should they happen? Where do you work first? What corners do you target to make your first actions? And what are the costs of those? And how should those lay out over time?
Yeah, and actually, you just think you need Councillor Matlow. You know, if we're thinking of putting a crossing in, then we want to get him on board, and he's really pretty good at that kind of thing, as we know now. Traffic, crossing, safety. So, you know, that's something we could start a partnership on that and target that early on.